The room was silent. Not the kind of silence you hear at night in an empty house. This was heavier. Television cameras hummed quietly. Lawyers shuffled papers. Team owners stared at the floor. One man rubbed his temples like he hadn't slept in days. On the table sat a small metal object, about the size of a briefcase. It didn't look dangerous. It didn't look controversial. It certainly didn't look powerful enough to erase an entire championship from the record books. But in the eyes of the officials sitting around that table, this engine had just detonated a season worth tens of millions of dollars. And someone was about to lose everything. Not because they crashed, not because they cheated in plain sight, but because of something hidden deep inside a machine no one fully understood until it was too late. The story started a year earlier, long before the hearings, long before the accusations, back when everything still looked like a dream season. American racing in the early 1990s was exploding. Stock car racing had become a cultural powerhouse. Sunday afternoons meant roaring V8s, packed grandstands, and television ratings that rivaled the NFL in parts of the country. Sponsors were pouring money into teams. Millions of dollars. Soft drink companies, oil brands, tool manufacturers, insurance firms. Winning a championship didn't just bring a trophy. It meant prestige, endorsements, and sometimes contracts worth more than a small-town factory payroll. Which is why one team, tucked away in a quiet North Carolina race shop, was willing to take a risk. Falcon Racing wasn't the biggest name in the garage. They didn't have the deepest pockets. They didn't have the largest engineering department. What they did have was desperation. For years they'd been close. Top 5 finishes, a few race wins, but never a championship. And in motorsports, almost can slowly kill a team. Sponsors get impatient. Investors disappear. Drivers start looking elsewhere. Falcon Racing needed something revolutionary, something no one else had. That's when their chief engine builder began whispering about an idea. At first, the mechanics thought he was joking, because what he was proposing sounded like something straight out of racing folklore. The kind of trick old-school innovators like Smokey Yunick would have dreamed up in a smoky garage decades earlier. The rules were simple on paper. Engines had to meet strict specifications. Same displacement, same configuration, same basic architecture. The sanctioning body believed these rules created fairness. But the engine builder saw something else. A loophole. A microscopic gray area buried deep inside the technical rulebook. The kind of loophole that only appears if you spend hundreds of hours staring at diagrams, regulations, and inspection procedures. And if he was right, it wouldn't just make the engine faster. It would make it unstoppable. At first, the team owner hesitated, because exploiting gray areas in racing was nothing new. But this felt different. If the governing body caught them, the consequences wouldn't just be a fine. It could mean disqualification, points penalties, maybe worse. But Falcon Racing had one thing pushing them forward. The driver. He was young, aggressive, and terrifyingly fast. Fans loved him. Sponsors adored him. And insiders believed he could win the championship if the car underneath him was just a little bit better. So the team made a decision. They would build the engine, but they would build it quietly. Late nights in the shop, parts machined by trusted specialists. Only a handful of people knew what was really happening inside that engine block. When the season started, nothing looked unusual. The car passed inspection. The engine looked normal. The officials checked their measurements. Everything appeared legal. But the moment the green flag dropped at the opening race, something strange happened. Falcon Racing was suddenly untouchable. Straightaways that used to feel competitive now looked one-sided. Their car pulled away like it had discovered an extra gear no one else could find. At first, rivals blamed driver skill. Then they blamed setup. Then they blamed luck. But by the 4th race of the season, whispers started spreading through the garage. Something wasn't right. Veteran crew chiefs began watching Falcon's car more carefully. They studied pit stops. They examined engine sounds. They even followed the team hauler in the paddock to see what parts were coming in and out. But every inspection came back clean. Every test passed. And the wins kept coming. 5 races. Then 6. Then 8. Television commentators started calling it a historic season. Sponsors lined up with new contracts. The driver became the face of the sport overnight. Kids wore his merchandise. Fans painted his number on their trucks. But inside the garages of rival teams, frustration was boiling over. Because the numbers didn't make sense. Their own engines were built by the best manufacturers in America. Some cost over $80,000 per unit. And yet Falcon Racing's car seemed to have power nobody else could match. One team owner finally said it out loud. They're hiding something. So the complaints started rolling in. Official protests, requests for deeper inspections. Rumors began leaking to journalists. Was Falcon using illegal fuel? Modified electronics? Secret parts hidden inside the intake system? The governing body launched a quiet investigation. But here's where the story gets strange. They couldn't find anything wrong. The engine passed teardown inspections. Measurements were perfect. Internal components looked standard. To the rulebook, Falcon Racing was clean. And by the time the season reached its final races, the championship was already decided. Falcon Racing's driver had dominated the year. Wins, pole positions, record-breaking speed. When he crossed the finish line at the last race of the season, the crowd erupted. Fireworks exploded over the grandstands. The team hugged in victory lane, and the championship trophy was placed in his hands. It looked like the perfect ending. Except the story wasn't over. Because weeks later, something changed. A rival team had been studying the engine teardown photos from earlier inspections. Not the obvious parts. Not the pistons. Not the intake. They were looking somewhere else. Deep inside the block. And suddenly, one engineer noticed something. Something almost invisible. A detail so small that inspectors had completely overlooked it. But if their theory was correct, Falcon Racing hadn't just built a clever engine. They had built one that violated the spirit of the rules in a way no one had imagined. The complaint reached the sanctioning body. At first, officials dismissed it. After all, the season was already over. The champion had been crowned. Fans had moved on. But the rival engineers wouldn't stop pushing. They brought diagrams, measurements, computer models, and eventually, the officials reopened the investigation. That's when the engine was brought back into the room. The same engine that had powered a championship season. The same engine that had passed every inspection months earlier. Now it was being examined with fresh eyes. And within hours, the room fell silent. Because the engineers realized something horrifying. The loophole was real. Falcon Racing had interpreted the rules in a way no one else had considered. Technically, parts of the engine met the written measurements. But the way those parts interacted created performance advantages the rulebook never intended. It was brilliant. It was devious. And depending on who you asked, it was either genius engineering or outright cheating. The hearings lasted days. Team owners argued. Lawyers debated the wording of technical regulations. Fans watched the drama unfold on television. And the driver, the man who had celebrated with champagne in victory lane, waited for the decision. Finally, the ruling came. The governing body announced that Falcon Racing's engine violated the competitive intent of the regulations. The results from multiple races would be nullified. Points would be recalculated. And the championship, the one already printed on posters and merchandise, would be revoked. Just like that. Months after the final race, the record books changed. Another driver was declared champion. Sponsors demanded explanations. Fans argued endlessly online and at racetracks. Some said Falcon Racing had been robbed. Others said justice had finally been served. The team owner lost several major sponsors within weeks. The engine builder quietly disappeared from the sport. And the driver who once stood on top of the racing world found himself answering the same question over and over again. Did you know? He always gave the same answer. No. But here's the part that still haunts people inside the sport. Years later, engineers continued studying the design Falcon Racing used that season. And some of them came to a surprising conclusion. The engine might not have been illegal at all. Not by the letter of the rules that existed at the time. Only by the interpretation that came afterward. Which raises a strange question that still lingers in racing circles today. Did Falcon Racing cheat their way to a championship? Or did they simply outsmart the rulebook and get punished for being too clever? Because that engine, the one that sat quietly on the table in that hearing room, did something no crash, lawsuit, or scandal had managed to do before. It rewrote history. And somewhere, in a forgotten workshop or private collection, that engine might still exist today. A silent piece of metal, worth millions in controversy, and carrying a secret that the sport may never fully admit. Was it illegal? Or was it just brilliant?